Hello, it's Ben again with the DIY Homefront, and I'm playing Mr. Repairman again. I've got a mosquito magnet. It's a device designed to use a propane tank to catch mosquitoes, and it does not work. I wish it had an LCD screen that actually told you something, but it just has one red blinking light that just blinks and annoys you. But at any rate, if you're curious to see what I do to fix my mosquito magnet, well, you're watching the right video. Let's get to it. Well, I've had this unit for 2 years and it worked perfect the first year, and I put it up for the winter, and when I pulled it out the second year it did not work, and we just sort of made do. But the mosquitoes are bad and it is time. It's either going in the trash or it's getting fixed, one or the other. Now, I'd already purchased some of these CO2 cartridges that you're supposed to put in here, and it's supposed to purge anything that might be clogging up the fuel line. But one little adapter for this is 28 bucks, and I wanted to tear it apart before I did anything else. I'm just curious to see what the parts look like on the inside. I've got a full propane tank right here, and this is supposed to have a couple of screws. And outside of those couple of screws, for the most part, this thing's made out of plastic. It's got a plastic bottom, a plastic support shaft, and then this top housing is made out of plastic, and it just sits on top of it. Well, it takes these little cartridges that are supposed to help draw in the mosquitoes, and they end up going in here. Well, normally the cartridge would just fall out, but I've got it upside down, and I'm going to have to get a pair of pliers or something to get it out. I know that's bad. It should get changed out with every tank full of propane, if I remember right. Should be a couple of screws that go in it, and there's a power plug. And you can't put it in backwards because of the way the pins line up. There's a total of 4 Phillips head screws that need to come out, 2 on each end. And when you try to separate it, don't forget about the little basket that catches all the mosquitoes. You'll need to make sure it's out of the way. It just collects the mosquitoes in here with the fan that comes on. Well, there shouldn't be any other screws that are holding this together, so I should be able to just pry these 2 pieces of plastic apart, and we can see what the internal components look like. Alright, well, here are the insides, and I'm going to give you a quick breakdown of what these components are. There's a printed circuit board that tells it how to function. There's a solenoid that controls the amount of propane that comes in. There's a heater element that ignites the propane. And there's a temperature device that tells if it's hot or not. And finally, there's a large aluminum housing that helps with the management of heat from the burning propane. So mosquitoes are attracted to the heat of our body, the carbon dioxide that we breathe out, and the odor that our bodies emit. And the way the mosquito magnet works is it burns propane to create a heat source, which gives off CO2 in the process, and then that little piece that I pulled out with a pair of pliers creates an odor that draws the mosquitoes to it. Well, eventually I'm going to need to plug this back up and run it to see if we got it fixed. So I'm going to go ahead and set it back up like it would normally be so we can hook the propane tank up, and we can do some function tests to see if I got it fixed or not. Well, this propane tank is almost completely full, and I took it off of my gas grill, which I used just the other day. So by the process of elimination, it's not the propane tank. Next, we'll hook up the power cable, which screws on to make a waterproof connection. But we're not going to turn the power on just yet. We're just going to hook up the power cord. Well, we can't see propane to tell if it's there or not, and we don't want this blowing up on us. So let's go ahead and remove the heater element to see what it looks like and see if it works. Now, it's a pretty delicate little piece, and we don't want to touch the end where it gets hot, so just be careful. We're not supposed to touch it. We're supposed to be real careful with it. That is supposed to glow and get everything hot. And then this is supposed to be the temperature regulator. It's supposed to know if it got hot. And it's a little corroded, isn't it? Let's get something and clean that off. I'm not sure really what's on it. It's like a white powdery dust, but the toothbrush isn't getting it off, so we're gonna have to use some sandpaper. This is what, 320 sandpaper? So I'm not 100% sure exactly how this temperature regulator works. So I want to be careful with it. I don't want to be too aggressive with the sandpaper because I don't want to break it or change the values that it reads as far as temperature goes. Well, I guess after we clean this up really good, we'll just have to make an assumption for the moment that it's working and we'll move on to something else. Okay. Let's put this back in there. And I'll tighten the screw up to make sure it's in place and properly seated. So this should be a solenoid, and all it does is open and close the path for the propane to enter the machine. Well, I really want to take this apart. So I'm going to need to take this screw out so I can remove this assembly and see what those CO2 cartridges are supposed to do. They were sold on Amazon.com as a way to clean or purge the propane tank system. Well, it doesn't seem like removing that one screw is going to free this up so I can take a look at it. So we'll need to take the 3 screws out that hold this to that green base, and maybe I can get it apart then. The way this is all wired together, I don't know if there's enough slack to be able to lift this up with this printed circuit board still attached to that gray housing. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect the circuit board from that gray housing and go ahead and check all the connectors that are on it to make sure that everything is plugged in well and nothing's loose. And once again, I'm doing this as a process of elimination. You know, we want to knock as many things out as causing the problem as possible. And a bad connection could be one of those things that's keeping this from working. And then you'll also want to look at the printed circuit board and make sure that there's no bad solder connection on any of the components. Sometimes the components can get hot enough on the board to actually melt the solder and pull away. Everything looks pretty good there. Well, I was really surprised. I had to actually lift this thing completely out of the Mosquito Magnet base before I was able to get the propane line and solenoid out. Unlike the gas grill with its large burners, this device has a very small aperture that the propane is supposed to go through. And I think some of our problem has to do with that system. So let's take a closer look at the solenoid and how it delivers the propane to the burner. That might be it. It might just be plugged up right there. Let's go ahead and take this off. 3/4 inch and 5/8. Well, if you're having similar problems like I do, where your mosquito magnet doesn't want to work, and you start trying to do some research, you'll find some common parts that are available. And one of them is supposed to be like a filter for your propane tank, which doesn't make much sense to me because propane is supposed to be a gas, and I'm not sure what you're supposed to be filtering since you burn everything. But there is a propane filter for this. And this is the filter. It's got like a porous kind of device on one end. I bet you that's our problem right there, I bet. And the propane comes out of a pinhole on the other side that almost has like a tarry substance on it. Well, now I understand why they sell these single-use CO2 cartridges. That adapter would allow you to screw it onto there and puncture it, and it would blow anything that was clogging that up out. Well, I still have to check that igniter for the propane, but I'm going to have to figure a way to clean this thing out too. So let's see if the igniter gets hot. Turn the power on. The fan comes on automatically when you turn the power switch on. And we could have to wait up to as long as 3 minutes for this heating element to actually start getting hot. And this is where a liquid crystal display that told you something would be pretty useful, because the only information you ever get is a slow blinking light means it's in warm up, A fast blinking light means there's a problem, and a solid blinking light means it's working. Well, I'm still waiting for some kind of indication to tell me that the heating element has come on. And that is one of my biggest gripes with this. Last year when I was trying to work with it, I just got so frustrated I stopped. Because you can have to wait up to 15 minutes for the cycle to decide that it's not working, and for you to get that fast blinking light. And that means every time you turn it on and off to see if you fixed it, you might be waiting 15 minutes to see if it's working. Well, if that heating element is still not hot, we got our glow, which means we should see gas right here. And there's a little bit of gas. You see the gas? Well, that flame means two things. The solenoid's working and the filter can't be totally clogged up. Well, that is really good news. That means I can go ahead and reassemble what I've taken apart. And then we can move on and see if that temperature sensor, the one I cleaned with the sandpaper, is working properly. Well, I'm not sure how many minutes have passed since we turned this on, but we could have to wait up to 15 minutes before we either get that solid red, which means it's working, or the fast flash, which means it's not. Well, we have a steady blink, 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 which means I have to just keep waiting for the result, but you don't, so let's fast forward. Well, not only am I a YouTuber, but I also watch a lot of YouTube. And just like you, I watched a video or two about mosquito magnets before I took mine apart to see what was going on. And there were two things that I picked up that you might want to try. The first was don't turn the propane tank all the way on, only halfway. And that seemed to help a couple people. And the other thing was, for those that took the mosquito magnet apart, put the covers back on before you try it. Because for whatever reason, it didn't work with the covers off. And I'm not superstitious, but I put the covers on partially just because I'm bored and I'm waiting to see what's going to happen for 15 minutes. And there it is. That's our solid light we're looking for, which means the mosquito magnet is functioning properly. Well, I was feeling pretty good about myself with that solid red light, so I let the mosquito magnet work overnight. And I came back and checked it the next day to see if it was still working properly. And I still had a solid red light, which means it's working right. Which means now I'm going to put all the screws back into this. I also need to take it to the backyard and set it back up where it can do the most damage to those mosquitoes and keep the area where we spend most of our time free of mosquitoes. Well, now that I've taken this completely apart and have a really good idea of how it works, I think I'm going to go ahead and order some spare parts for this mosquito magnet. So if I have problems in the future, I have some things on hand that might fix it right then and there. And the first thing would be that adapter, so I can hook up those CO2 cartridges to help purge the propane line and filter. The second thing is I think I'm going to go ahead and order one of those filters, the little brass piece that had like the eraser looking thing on the end. And then finally, I think I'm going to see if I can try to find that thermistor. Because I really feel what fixed this machine was taking the sandpaper and lightly getting all the dust that was off of that thermistor. I think it might have been changing the value that it read. At least that's my opinion. Because to be honest, we just took things apart and confirmed that they worked properly. We looked for connectors. We took the heating element out to see it glow red. We checked the solenoid to make sure it worked so the propane came out. So the only thing we really did that was like a fix or an action was we cleaned off that thermistor. So the power cord just plugs in, but it also has a little twist knob on it, and you actually have to tighten the threads up to it. And I believe what that does is it creates that watertight connection. Another thing I also know is that the transformer will get so hot that it'll just burn up and go bad. About 3/4 of the way through our first year, we had the transformer plugged into our greenhouse for electricity, and it was in direct sunlight, and I don't know, the combination between the greenhouse, the summer heat, and the sunlight, that transformer just died, so we had to replace that the first year. It is just about impossible to tell if that red light is blinking during the day. But after a few minutes, it went solid, so it's working right. Alright, looks like I got it fixed. It's been working for about 3 weeks. Let me show you why I like this when it does work. Well, you can hear the little fan blowing. It sucks air in, which ends up pulling the mosquitoes in. I don't know if you can see inside it. You see the little mosquitoes flying around in there? Well, they will fly around in there for about 24 hours, and after that they will die of dehydration and they won't be biting us anymore. Well, it took a little bit longer than I had planned to edit this video, but because of that, the propane tank ran out. And I just wanted to show you how many insects were actually inside of that little trap. A lot of these are gnats, but that is a lot of insects regardless of whatever they are. Well, there you have it. It looks like we fixed our mosquito magnet, and that's a good thing because they're not cheap and they're handy to have when it's mosquito season. I still had the 2 parts ordered, the one that lets me use a CO2 cartridge to blow out the gas line and a new gas tip just in case. Well, that's it for now. Like, subscribe, check out my playlist, and I'll see you in that next Fix It video.